the romantic lie hook, an introduction. Close your eyes and picture a pirate. What do you see? Perhaps a charismatic figure standing at the helm of a magnificent ship, wind catching in billowing sails. The open ocean stretching endlessly before them, free, powerful, romantic. The image is intoxicating, isn't it? The tricorn hat, the gleaming sword, the promise of adventure and treasure. Hollywood has been kind to pirates, painting them as lovable rogues with hearts of gold. Rebels against tyranny, symbols of absolute freedom. But tonight, I want you to forget everything you think you know, because the reality of pirate life was so horrifying, so utterly brutal, that if you truly understood what it meant to sail under the black flag, you would never romanticize it again. Imagine yourself not in a movie, but in the actual year 1715. You're standing on a dock in Port Royal, Jamaica, or perhaps in the Carolinas. Or maybe you've just jumped ship from a British naval vessel where the captain's cruelty finally became too much to bear. Your clothes are little more than rags. Your stomach aches with a hunger that's become your constant companion. You have no money, no prospects, and in your pocket, perhaps a warrant for your arrest for deserting, or for stealing bread, or for debts you cannot possibly repay. Behind you lies a world that has chewed you up and spat you out, a world where you were pressed into service against your will, or where your labor was worth less than the cost of feeding you, or where one wrong step landed you in debtor's prison with no hope of escape. And then you hear about a ship, a pirate ship. The men who sail her share the plunder equally. They elect their own captain. They make their own rules. No aristocratic officers to flog you for sport. No merchant owners to work you to death for their profit. Just freedom, they say. Just brotherhood and gold. In your desperation, in your anger at the world that has failed you so completely, it sounds like paradise. It sounds like the only choice you have left. This is how most pirates were made, not from ambition, but from desperation. Not from greed, but from having absolutely nothing left to lose. And in this moment, standing on that dock, listening to the promises of men who've already made the choice you're contemplating, you cannot possibly understand what you're about to condemn yourself to. You cannot imagine the reality that awaits you aboard that ship. The pirates you've heard about, Blackbeard, Anne, Bonny, Bartholomew, Roberts, they're the exceptions. The ones whose names survived because their stories were exceptional. For every famous pirate captain, there were hundreds of nameless men who died in agony, their bodies feeding the fish or rotting in gibbets, their stories lost to time. The Golden Age of Piracy lasted roughly 40 years, from about 1650 to 1730, depending on how you count it. 40 years. In that time, perhaps 3,000 to 5,000 men total turned pirate in the Caribbean and American waters. Of those thousands, we remember maybe 24 names. Think about those odds. Think about what happened to all the others. But you don't know this yet, standing on that dock. You don't know that the average pirate's career lasted 2 to 3 years before ending in death or capture. You don't know that disease would be a far greater threat than naval battles. You don't know about the hunger, the thirst, the wounds that fester, the friends who die screaming in the night. You don't know that the freedom you're seeking will become the most elaborate prison you could imagine, a prison made of water and wood, from which there is no escape except death. The men recruiting you don't tell you these things, of course. They speak of liberty and fortune. They show you their weapons, their swagger. Some of them genuinely believe what they're saying. They've convinced themselves that this life, for all its horrors, is better than the alternatives. And perhaps, in some ways, it is. Perhaps dying of scurvy on a pirate ship feels like a better fate than dying of scurvy on a naval vessel where you were pressed into service, where flogging was routine, where you had no voice, no vote, no share of anything. This is the terrible truth at the heart of piracy. It existed because the legitimate world was often just as cruel, just as deadly, and far less fair. The merchant, marine, and naval vessels of the early 18th century were floating hells. Captains had absolute power, and many abused it horrifically. Sailors were paid poorly when they were paid at all. Food was deliberately kept minimal to maximize profit. Discipline was maintained through brutal violence. When a sailor died at sea, as they frequently did, they were simply replaced at the next port. They were disposable, utterly disposable. Piracy offered an alternative to this disposability. On a pirate ship, you had rights enshrined in the ship's articles, a written code of conduct that every man signed. You could vote to remove a captain who was incompetent or cruel. You received an equal share of the plunder, or close to it. If you were injured in action, you received compensation, set amounts for the loss of limbs or eyes, a kind of disability insurance that legitimate shipping companies never dreamed of offering. The injured weren't simply cast aside. They were cared for, at least as well as the crew's meager resources allowed. This democracy, this brotherhood, was real. It was one of the most genuinely egalitarian societies of its time. Former slaves could become pirates and be treated as equals. A black man could captain a ship if the crew voted for him, something unthinkable in the legitimate world. This matters. It's important. It's part of why the pirate myth endures. Because buried in all the horror and violence was this radical idea that men could govern themselves, that hierarchy could be challenged, that the accidents of birth didn't have to determine everything. But here's what they don't tell you. In the stories, all of this, the democracy, the equality, the brotherhood, existed within a context of almost unimaginable suffering. You were free to vote, yes, but you were voting on which merchant ship to attack, which meant voting on which innocent sailors you might have to threaten, injure, or kill. You received equal shares, yes, but equal shares of plunder that might not come for months, during which time you survived on rotting food and contaminated water. You had rights, yes, but those rights existed on a vessel that was simultaneously your home, your workplace, and your floating coffin. The freedom you sought by becoming a pirate was freedom from one form of oppression, but it came at the cost of accepting another. You escaped the tyranny of legitimate authority only to become a hunted criminal, unable ever to return to normal society. You escaped the backbreaking labor of honest work only to face the constant physical suffering of shipboard life. You escaped poverty only to live in squalor, with the theoretical promise of wealth that rarely materialized and, even when it did, couldn't be spent anywhere respectable, and there was no going back. The moment you signed those articles, the moment you raised a weapon against a merchant vessel, you became a pirate in the eyes of every government in the world. England would hang you. Spain would torture you first, then hang you. France would execute you. Portugal, the Netherlands, every colonial power on it you dead. Your former identity was erased. You could never use your real name in a port. You could never contact your family. If you had a wife, children, parents who loved you, they were dead to you now, or you were dead to them. The authorities might even arrest them on suspicion of harboring a pirate if you were foolish enough to try to make contact. This was the devil's bargain of piracy. Freedom and democracy and brotherhood, yes, but purchased at the price of everything else. Purchased at the price of your health, your safety, your future, and quite possibly your humanity. Because to survive as a pirate, you would have to do things that would change you. You would have to threaten people who had done you no wrong. You would have to watch men die, and sometimes you would have to be the one who killed them. You would have to harden yourself against suffering your own and others, until that hardness became who you were. Standing on that dock in 1715, you cannot know any of this. You cannot imagine it. All you know is that you're desperate, that the world has beaten you down, and that someone is offering you a way out. So you'll probably take it. You'll sign those articles. You'll board that ship. And from that moment forward, your life will never be the same. You've just chosen a path that will almost certainly end in your death within 3 years. And it will be a death preceded by suffering that would break most people. But I'm getting ahead of myself. First, you have to understand what it actually meant to join a pirate crew. To sign your name, more make your mark, if you cannot write in those famous articles. You have to understand the moment when you stopped being whoever you were and became a pirate, an enemy of all mankind, a criminal hunted across every ocean. Have you ever wondered what would drive someone to choose such a life? What combination of desperation, hope, and delusion could make the horrors of piracy seem preferable to any alternative? Let's step aboard that ship together and find out. Let's walk through that moment of transformation, the point of no return, when you signed away everything you were for the slim promise of something better. Joining the account, the point of no return, the ship rocks gently beneath your feet as you stand on the deck with the other new recruits. There are maybe 5 or 6 of you, men, who've come aboard in the last few days from various desperate circumstances. Some came willingly, like you. Others were captured from merchant vessels and given a choice: join or be marooned on a barren island with no food or water. That's not really a choice at all, is it? But pirates maintain the fiction that every man aboard has chosen this life freely, because choice matters to them, even when that choice is between one form of death and another. The captain stands before you. He's not what you expected. Perhaps you imagined Blackbeard with his smoking beard, or some Hollywood vision of rakish charm. But this man is weathered and hard, his skin darkened and creased by sun and salt. He's missing 2 fingers on his left hand. There's a scar that runs from his temple to his jaw. His clothes, while probably the finest on the ship, are still salt-stained and worn. He looks tired. This is what surprises you most, not the menace or the swagger, but the exhaustion that seems to live behind his eyes. You're here to sign the articles, he says, his voice rough. Once you sign, you're one of us. But understand what that means. You're not joining a crew. You're joining an account, a partnership. Every man here is your equal. Every man here has a vote. And every man here is bound by the same rules you're about to agree to. The quartermaster second in command on a pirate ship, elected separately from the captain, and often more powerful. It's written in a hand that varies from neat to barely legible, as different men contributed different articles. This is the ship's code, and it's surprisingly detailed. You expected something simple, maybe even savage, but instead you're hearing about a carefully constructed system of governance. The articles vary from ship to ship, but they follow common patterns. No fighting among the crew, disputes to be settled on shore with pistols or swords, supervised by the quartermaster. No gambling for money aboard ship. Lights and candles out by 8 o'clock. Every man has a vote in affairs of the moment and an equal share of provisions. Musicians get Sundays off. If you steal from your fellow pirates, your punishment is marooning. If you desert in battle, your punishment is death or marooning. If you bring a woman aboard disguised as a man, your punishment is death. The compensation for injuries is spelled out with startling precision. Loss of a right arm, 600 pieces of 8 or 6 slaves. Loss of a left arm, 500 pieces of 8 or 5 slaves. Loss of a right leg, 500 pieces of 8. Loss of a left leg, 400 pieces of 8. Loss of an eye or a finger, 100 pieces of 8. This is the promised insurance policy, the safety net that legitimate shipping companies never provided. It's both practical and grotesque, being told exactly what your body parts are worth before you've even risked them. The shares are explained. The captain gets 1.5 or 2 shares, depending on what's been agreed. The quartermaster, bosun, and gunner get 1.25 shares. Every ordinary crew member gets 1 share. It sounds fair, especially compared to merchant vessels, where officers took the lion's share and common sailors received pittance. But what they don't mention, what you'll only learn later, is how rarely there's anything to share. Piracy is feast or famine, and famine is far more common. Sign here, the quartermaster says, pointing to the bottom of the document. Some of the men ahead of you write their names in careful script. Others make an X, unable to read or write. One man draws a small symbol, instead maybe his personal mark, or maybe just something he thought looked official. When it's your turn, you take the pen. Your hand shakes slightly. This feels ceremonial, important, like a contract with the devil himself, and in a way, it is. The moment your name appears on that document, everything changes. You are now, in the eyes of every government in the world, a pirate, an enemy of all mankind. That's the actual legal term, hostis humani generis. Enemy of all mankind, not just an enemy of England or Spain or France, but of humanity itself. You've placed yourself outside the protection of any law, any nation, any civilized code. If you're captured, you won't be treated as a prisoner of war. You won't be ransomed. You won't be tried as a common criminal. You'll be tried as a pirate, and the sentence is always the same: death by hanging. There's no trial by jury, not really. Piracy trials are perfunctory affairs. If you're identified as a pirate, you hang. The legal proceedings are just a formality, a thin veneer of civilization over what is essentially summary execution. And the execution itself is designed to be a spectacle, a warning to others. You'll hang at the low tide mark, and your body will remain there through 3 tides, a day and a half of public display before you're cut down. Sometimes, For the most notorious pirates, the bodies are tarred, left to rot for months or years, as a warning to anyone entering the harbor. You don't think about this as you sign. Or maybe you do, but you've convinced yourself it won't happen to you. Everyone thinks they'll be the exception. Everyone thinks they'll be the one who gets away with it, who retires rich to some tropical paradise. The odds say you won't. The odds say you'll be dead within 3 years, probably from disease, possibly from drowning, maybe from battle, and if you're unlucky, from hanging. But humans are spectacularly bad at processing odds when the alternative is surrendering to the misery of their current circumstances. After you sign, there's often a ceremony of sorts. On some ships, you swear an oath. The wording varies, but the substance is always the same. Loyalty to your brothers, commitment to the code, and acceptance that you've burned all bridges to your former life. Some crews make it religious, swearing on a Bible, even though they're about to commit acts that violate every commandment. The irony seems lost on them. Or maybe they've reconciled it somehow. Perhaps they believe that a corrupt world has forfeited its right to judge them by its own rules on other ships, particularly those with a lot of former slaves or men who've suffered under religious hypocrisy. The oath is deliberately sacrilegious. They swear on the ship itself, or on their weapons, or on nothing at all except their word to each other. This atheistic or anti-religious stance is part of what makes pirates so terrifying to authorities. They've rejected not just legal authority, but moral authority. They've decided that the rules don't apply to them because the rules were written by and for people who've exploited them, and then it's done. You're a pirate. Your crewmates might welcome you with a drink, if there's rum to spare. They might clap you on the back, call you brother. But don't mistake this for warmth. Not entirely. You're useful to them now. You're another hand to haul rope, another man to board a prize, another body to share the hardships. The brotherhood is real, but it's born of mutual need and shared desperation. These men will die for you, not out of love, but because their survival depends on collective action. And you'll do the same for them, for the same reason. Look around at your new brothers. Really look at them. That man with the tropical ulcers on his legs, weeping pus through his torn breeches, he joined 8 months ago. The one with scurvy, his gums receding, teeth loose in his mouth, he's been aboard for a year. The one missing his left eye, the socket healed to a puckered scar, he lost it 3 months ago when a rope snapped during a storm. And he received his 100 pieces of 8, which he gambled away the next time they made port. These are your brothers now. This is your future, written in their damaged bodies. Most of the men aboard are between 18 and 35 years old. Pirates rarely live long enough to become old men, and the physical demands of the life make it nearly impossible for anyone older to survive. Many are former sailors, merchant, marine, navy, privateer crews. Some are escaped slaves, primarily in the Caribbean. Men who seized their freedom the only way available to them and now fight to keep it. Some are escaped criminals, debtors, or indentured servants. A few are Native Americans, particularly in the early years. Men displaced by colonial expansion who've allied with pirates against their common enemies. What unites you all is that the legitimate world failed you. Society had no place for you, or the place it offered was intolerable. You're the disposable men the ones who fell through the cracks of civilization, and now you've banded together to survive outside that civilization's boundaries. It's almost noble when you think of it that way, almost. But there's another truth, harder to swallow. Many of you are also violent men. Some of you were violent before you became pirates, and that violence is part of why you ended up here. The legitimate world doesn't just fail people randomly. It fails people who are already difficult, already angry, already willing to hurt others. Not everyone aboard is a victim driven to piracy by circumstances beyond their control. Some are predators who found a profession that suited their natures. This is the uncomfortable reality of pirate democracy. Yes, it's egalitarian. Yes, it's revolutionary in its own way. But it's a democracy of desperate and often dangerous men who voted to commit crimes together. The articles you just signed are designed not to create a utopia, but to keep order among people who've already demonstrated they don't respect conventional order. Every rule exists because someone did something that made the rule necessary. No fighting aboard ship because men killed each other in arguments over nothing. No gambling because men have stabbed shipmates over gambling debts. Equal shares because previous crews tore themselves apart over unequal distributions. You're realizing now, maybe, that you've joined something more complex than you imagined. It's not the Navy, with its rigid hierarchy and brutal discipline. But it's not freedom either, not really. It's a different kind of structure, more humane in some ways, but ultimately just as confining. You've traded one set of rules for another, one form of danger for another. The difference is that this time, you chose it. You signed those articles of your own free will, or something close to it, and there's no going back. Even if you wanted to desert, where would you go? You're probably at sea right now, with the nearest land days or weeks away. Even if you reached land, what then? You're a pirate now. That's not a job you can quit and put on a resume. There's no honorable discharge, no severance package. You can't return to your old life assuming you had one worth returning to. You're trapped just as surely as if you were in a prison, except your prison is made of water and wood and sails, and it moves with you wherever you go. Welcome to piracy. This is your life now. Every day that follows will be shaped by the decision you just made, by the name you just signed on those articles. You are brother to these men, partner in their crimes, and fellow prisoner in this floating hell. The adventure you imagined is about to collide with reality. And reality aboard a pirate ship is more horrible than you can yet comprehend. You'll learn, though, starting right now, as the captain dismisses you and you're shown to your berth below deck. Let's go see where you'll be sleeping, shall we? Let's discover what home means aboard a pirate vessel. Your ship is your prison living conditions. The first thing that hits you as you descend the ladder into the lower deck is the smell. It's a physical thing, this smell thick enough to choke on. Imagine every terrible odor you've ever encountered. Layer them together, and then trap them in an enclosed space with no circulation for months. Human sweat not, the clean sweat of exercise, but the sour, acidic sweat of men who haven't bathed in weeks or months. Unwashed bodies, skin caked with salt and grime. The bilge water sloshing at the bottom of the ship, a fetid mixture of seawater, human waste, rotting food, and everything else that's leaked down there. The sharp ammonia stench of urine, because not everyone makes it to the head in rough seas or during the night. The smell of wet wood slowly rotting, of mildew and mold growing in every damp corner. And underneath it all, something else, something sweet and wrong, the smell of disease, of infected wounds, of bodies breaking down. Your eyes need a moment to adjust to the darkness. The only light comes from a few small openings and whatever trickles down from the hatch you just came through. This is where you live now. This dim, reeking space below the waterline, where the ceiling is so low you can't stand fully upright. You're tall by 18th century standards at 5 feet 9 inches, and here you must perpetually stoop or crouch. Your back will develop a permanent ache within days. The shorter men have a slight advantage, but even they cannot move freely. Everyone aboard develops a distinctive shuffling gait, a way of moving through cramped spaces without cracking their heads on the deck beams. The quartermaster points to a section of space that's supposedly yours. It's perhaps 2 feet wide and 6 feet long, the length of a coffin, you think, and then wish you hadn't. A hammock hangs there, or rather will hang there when you get one. The hammocks are packed so close together that when everyone's sleeping, you're essentially in a cocoon of human bodies, swaying in unison with the ship's motion. The man to your left will be inches from your face. The man to your right will be close enough that you can feel his body heat. If he snores, and he probably does, you'll hear every gurgle and snort. If he has a nightmare, you'll feel him thrashing. If he has dysentery, which many men do, you'll smell it intimately. There's no privacy, none. The concept doesn't exist below deck. You undress in front of everyone. You dress in front of everyone. When you're sick, everyone witnesses it. When you're in pain, everyone hears you. When you need to relieve yourself at night, you fumble for the bucket in the dark, while dozens of men lie feet away. Embarrassment is a luxury you'll learn to abandon quickly. Shame requires space, and there is no space here. The hammock itself is your most valued possession after your weapons. It's made of canvas, roughly woven, and it becomes your bed, your chair, and your only personal territory. You'll spend at least 1/3 of your life in it, probably more. When you're ill you will be ill. Repeatedly you'll spend days in that hammock, barely leaving it, except to stumble to the bucket or above deck for fresh air, if you can manage it. You'll eat in it, sleep in it, recover from wounds in it, and quite possibly die in it. Getting comfortable in a hammock is an art that takes weeks to master. Your first night, you'll probably fall out at least once, much to the amusement of your crewmates. Even after you learn the trick of lying diagonal, of finding the right amount of sag, of swaying with the ship's motion rather than against it, you'll never sleep as well as you did on land. The hammock restricts your movement. You can't roll over freely. You can't stretch out. Your body curls into a banana shape whether you want it to or not. Men wake with stiff necks, aching backs, and numb limbs from sleeping in awkward positions. And the motion, the constant motion. The ship never stops moving. In calm seas, it's a gentle rock that might almost be soothing if everything else weren't so miserable. But calm seas are rare. More often, the ship pitches and rolls. Your hammock swings wildly, sometimes slamming you into the man next to you. Your stomach lurches. Even experienced sailors get seasick in bad storms, vomiting into whatever container they can grab, adding another layer to the symphony of smells below deck. The heat is unbearable. In the Caribbean, the temperature below deck can reach well over 100 degrees Fahrenheit. The air is so thick and humid, you feel like you're breathing water. Men lie gasping in their hammocks, sweating through the rags that pass for clothing, desperately fanning themselves with whatever they can find. Some stay above deck as much as possible, even sleeping in the open air. But that brings its own problem: sunburn that blisters your skin, exposure to weather, and the risk of being swept overboard if you're not careful in winter. Or, when sailing northern routes, the opposite problem emerges. The cold penetrates everything. The damp gets into your bones. You have no dry clothes because nothing dries in the humid air below deck. You wear the same wet, salt-encrusted garments day after day, and they chafe your skin raw at every point of friction: armpits, groin, between your toes. The skin breaks down, and in those breaks, infections take root. Saltwater boils, tropical ulcers. They have many names, but they all mean the same thing: painful, oozing sores that resist healing and can become gangrenous. The livestock lives down here with you. Yes, if the ship has captured any animals, chickens, goats, sometimes pigs, they're kept below deck in makeshift pens. They add their waste and noise to the overall misery. Chickens squawk, goats bleat, pigs grunt and root through whatever they can reach. The animals are food, precious food, so they're guarded carefully. But they also mean you're sharing your living space with creatures that defecate freely, that attract flies, that smell even worse than the men. And speaking of animals, let's talk about your other roommates, the rats. They're everywhere. Rats thrive on ships, and a pirate vessel, with its stores of food and general filth, is rat paradise. They're bold, these rats. They'll run across you while you sleep. They'll bite if you corner them. They'll chew through your belongings, eat your food, and spread disease. You'll hear them constantly squeaking, scratching, fighting with each other in the dark. Some men become obsessed with killing rats, making it a personal mission. Others learn to coexist, developing an almost respectful understanding with the vermin they can't eliminate. The rats bring fleas, and the fleas bring typhus. The lice bring typhus too. You'll have lice within your first week aboard if you don't have them already. They'll live in your hair, your clothes, your hammock. You'll feel them crawling on you constantly. At night, when things are quiet, you can hear the sound of dozens of men scratching simultaneously, nails against skin, trying to find relief from the itching that never stops. Some men shave their heads to reduce the habitat for lice, but it doesn't help much. The lice just migrate to other body hair or to your clothing. Cockroaches add to the ecosystem. They're huge, these tropical roaches, some as long as your thumb. They scuttle across the floor, up the walls, over the ceiling. They land on you while you sleep. They get into the food stores. You'll find them everywhere, and there's nothing you can do about it. They're nearly impossible to kill. Crushing one just makes a horrible crunching sound and an even worse smell. They've survived for millions of years, and they'll certainly survive your attempts at extermination. The water barrel sits in one corner, and it's a source of constant anxiety. Water is more precious than rum, though rum lasts longer without going bad. The water in the barrel turns brackish within weeks. Green algae grows on the sides. Things live in it: larvae, bacteria, organisms you can't see, but can certainly feel in your gut when they make you sick. You drink it anyway, because the alternative is dying of thirst. You learn to drink in the dark, or to drink through clenched teeth, filtering out the worst of the solids. You never look at what you're drinking if you can help it. The bucket, the communal toilet buckets, sits in another corner, though its location shifts depending on the ship's arrangements. It's emptied regularly, but regularly isn't often enough. It overflows. It tips in rough seas. The smell of it permeates everything. There's a moment, usually within your first week, when you have dysentery or food poisoning, when you're squatting over that bucket in full view of dozens of men, your intestines cramping and voiding simultaneously from both ends, when you realize you've lost something essential, dignity, maybe, or the illusion that you're anything more than an animal trying to survive your possessions. The few you have must be carefully guarded. Theft is punishable by marooning according to the articles, but small items still disappear. You have perhaps a spare shirt if you're lucky, an extra pair of breeches, maybe a neckerchief. You might have a knife that's truly yours, not ship's property. If you had anything of value when you joined, you've probably already lost it to gambling or trading for better food. What little you have, you keep close, maybe in a small bag that you use as a pillow or tuck into your hammock. The crew is 80 men strong on this particular vessel, though that number varies dramatically from ship to ship. Some pirate ships operated with as few as 20 men. Others, particularly the most successful ones, might have over 200. But this space you're in was designed for maybe 30 or 40 sailors, maximum. You're living with double or triple the safe occupancy, and it shows. There's no room to move. Tempers are short. Fights break out over nothing. A look, an accidental shove, a perceived slight. The articles forbid fighting aboard ship, but that doesn't stop the constant, low-level aggression, the pushing and shoving that stops just short of actual violence. At night, the sounds are what drive some men mad. Snoring, yes, but also coughing. So much coughing. Nearly everyone has some kind of respiratory condition from the damp, the mold, the poor air circulation, the tobacco smoke that fills the space whenever someone's allowed to light a pipe. Men cough until they retch. Some cough up blood. The sound of it echoes in the enclosed space, a symphony of diseased lungs struggling to function. Men cry out in their sleep. They have nightmares about battles, about drowning, about the people they've killed or seen killed. They relive their worst moments. Some men talk in their sleep, revealing secrets or fears they'd never admit when conscious. Others thrash and kick, disturbing everyone around them. A few sleepwalk, or try to, fumbling around in the dark until someone stops them before they hurt themselves. And the silence, when it comes, is almost worse than the noise. In those rare moments when everyone's asleep and even the rats are quiet, you can hear the ship itself. The creaking of wood, the groan of ropes, the slosh of water against the hull. You become acutely aware that you're in a wooden box, floating on an ocean that wants to kill you, held together by tar and nails and the skill of men who probably cut corners. You think about how deep the water is beneath you. You think about how quickly you'd drown if the ship went down, trapped below deck with no time to reach the ladder. You think about the men who've died on this very ship, whose hammocks were simply reassigned to new crew members, whose blood might still be staining the floorboards somewhere. You think too much, and the thinking is dangerous, so you try not to think. You try to just exist, to get through each day and night without dwelling on the horror of your situation. You tell yourself it's temporary, that you'll make your fortune and get out. But deep down, you're starting to understand that this is your life now. This cramped, stinking, miserable space is your home. These diseased, desperate men are your family. And the ship that imprisons you is also the only thing keeping you alive, keeping you afloat in a world that would gladly watch you drown tomorrow. You'll wake if you sleep at all and begin your first full day of work. But tonight, lying in your hammock for the first time, surrounded by the sounds and smells of your new brothers, you finally understand what you've done. You've traded one kind of hell for another, and there's no going back. This is your life now, for however long that life lasts. Welcome home, pirate. Welcome home. The food that kept you barely Oliver awakened before dawn by the sound of the ship's bell and the quartermaster's voice calling all hands. Your first thought is hunger. Your second thought is also hunger. Your third thought is a vague memory of a time when you weren't always hungry, though that memory feels like it belongs to someone else's life. You've been aboard for 2 weeks now, and hunger has become your constant companion, a hollow ache in your belly that never quite goes away even after you've eaten. The morning ration is distributed on deck. Each man receives his portion directly from the quartermaster or the cook, a deliberate system designed to prevent theft and ensure fairness. The pirate obsession with equal shares extends to food, perhaps because food is the one thing that matters even more than gold when you're at sea. You can't eat gold. You can't survive on promises of future wealth. But food, wretched as it is, keeps you alive day by day. Your breakfast is hardtack. If you're unfamiliar with hardtack, let me paint you a picture. It's a biscuit, but not like any biscuit you'd want to eat. It's made from flour, water, and salt, mixed into a dough and then baked until it's rock-hardened. I mean truly rock-hardened. You cannot bite into hardtack without risking your teeth. The biscuits are baked this way intentionally to make them last for months or even years without spoiling. They're barely food, really. They're more like edible stones, delivery systems for carbohydrates and nothing else. No taste, no nutrition beyond basic calories. Just hardness and the faint flavor of flour. But even that description makes hardtack sound better than it is, because I haven't mentioned the weevils yet. Within weeks of being stored, hardtack becomes infested with weevils, small beetles that lay their eggs in the flour. The larvae burrow through the biscuits, creating networks of tiny holes. By the time you're eating it, your hardtack is more weevil than biscuit. You can see them, these little white grubs, wriggling inside when you break the biscuit open. You can see the beetles themselves, hard-shelled and dark, crawling across the surface. The veterans have taught you the trick: eat in the dark, or at least in dim light. Don't look too closely at what you're eating. The weevils are protein, they say, almost joking. Extra meat. You're supposed to laugh, but the first time you knowingly bite into a mouthful of insects, you have to fight not to vomit. The texture is wrong. You can feel them in your mouth, the little bodies crushing between your teeth. Some are still alive, still wriggling. You force yourself to swallow because you need the calories, because throwing up means going hungry. because everyone else is eating their weevils without complaint. And you won't be the weak one who can't handle it after a few weeks. You develop the ability to not think about it. You soften the hardtack in water if there's water to spare, or in your mouth, letting your saliva slowly break down the rock-like texture. You chew mechanically, your mind deliberately blank, refusing to process what you're eating. It's just fuel, just something to stop the hunger for a few hours. That's what you tell yourself. That's the lie you need to believe to get it down. With the hardtack, you get a ration of salted meat. This is either salted pork or salted beef, and calling it meat is generous. It's been preserved in brine, so saturated with salt that nothing can grow in it, which means it lasts indefinitely, but also means it's nearly inedible. The salt has leached out most of the moisture, most of the flavor, and left behind something that's more like leather than meat. It's tough, fibrous, and so salty it makes your tongue burn and your throat ache with thirst. Before you can eat the salt meat, it has to be soaked in water to remove some of the salt. On a good day, when water isn't critically low, the cook boils it in changes of water, trying to make it palatable. Even after soaking, it's still incredibly salty. You eat it in small pieces, chewing laboriously to break down the tough fibers. And then you drink water desperately, trying to quench the thirst that the salt creates. Except the water makes you thirstier because it's brackish and contaminated, so you drink more, and the cycle continues. Sometimes the meat isn't properly preserved. Sometimes the brine wasn't strong enough, or the barrel leaked, or the meat was already starting to turn before it was salted. Then you get meat that's not just salty and tough, but also rotting. You can smell it before you taste it, a sickly sweet smell of decay. You can see it, the greenish tinge, the slime on the surface. The cook scrapes off the worst of it, rinses the meat, and serves it anyway. You eat it anyway. You can't afford to be choosy. Food is food, even when it's actively decomposing. The official ration, according to most ships' articles, is supposed to be about a pound of hardtack and a pound of meat per day, plus a gallon of beer or a pint of rum. That's the theory. The reality is that supplies run low. The food spoils faster than expected. The crew is larger than anticipated. Somewhere in the chain of supply, someone shorted you. So your pound becomes 3/4 of a pound, becomes half a pound. Your daily ration becomes your reliable meal schedule becomes an unpredictable lottery of whenever there's food to distribute. On a good voyage, one where you've recently captured a well-stocked merchant vessel, you might have luxuries. Fresh bread, still soft, vegetables that aren't completely withered, cheese that's only slightly moldy, citrus fruits, those precious oranges and limes that the officers know prevent scurvy, even if they don't understand why. You might have wine instead of rum, or better quality rum. You might have sugar to sweeten your tea or coffee if the ship has tea or coffee. These are the feasts, and they're glorious. You eat until your stomach aches, hoarding food in your mouth like a squirrel, knowing it won't last. But good voyages are rare. More often, you're on a bad voyage, weeks or months, without capturing anything valuable. The supplies dwindle. The rations shrink. The quality, never good to begin with, deteriorates further. You're eating hardtack that's more dust than biscuit, meat that's more salt than meat. You're drinking water that's more algae than water. And you're grateful for it, because the alternative is starvation. The cook aboard a pirate ship is not someone who trained in culinary arts. He's usually a regular crew member who's either too injured for other work or has shown some minimal aptitude for not poisoning everyone. He works with a brick hearth built on deck. Cooking below deck would be a fire hazard, and his tools are basic: a pot, a pan, some utensils. He's not trying to make good food. He's trying to make edible food. And even that's a challenge with the ingredients available. The ship's cook makes a dish called lobscouse, which becomes a staple of your diet. It's a stew, if you can call it that, made from hardtack soaked in water until it disintegrates, mixed with chunks of salt meat and boiled together. Sometimes there are onions if you're lucky, or potatoes if you're very lucky. Mostly, it's just wet hardtack and meat, a gray, lumpy mixture that has all the appetite appeal of gruel. But it's hot, and it's filling, and after weeks of cold hardtack, hot food feels like a luxury. There's also burgoo, which is similar but made with oatmeal instead of hardtack, sweetened with molasses, if any is available. It's slightly better than lobscouse, but that's not saying much. And there's salmagundi, a kind of salad made from whatever's available: chopped meat, fish, if anyone caught any, vegetables, if you have them, all mixed with oil and vinegar. It sounds almost appetizing until you remember that the meat is rancid salt pork. The fish has been sitting in the sun, and the vegetables are limp and spotted. The real luxury, the thing you fantasize about, is fresh food. Fresh meat from an animal slaughtered recently, not months ago. Bread that hasn't turned into a home for insects. Vegetables with color and crunch. Fruit that isn't dried or preserved. These things exist in ports, but you can't risk most ports. You're a pirate. In civilized ports, you'd be arrested. So you're limited to Pirate Haven's Port Royal before the earthquake. New Providence in its heyday, Tortuga, and even there, fresh food is expensive and scarce. When you do make port, you eat and drink with desperate abandon. You spend your shares on meals in taverns, real meals with meat and vegetables and bread. You drink rum that hasn't been watered down. You eat fruit until your stomach hurts. It's glorious and brief, and then you're back at sea with your hardtack and salt meat, and the memory of real food becomes another form of torture. The worst part of the diet isn't the monotony or even the poor quality. It's what it does to your body. You're not getting enough vitamins. You're not getting enough variety. Your body starts breaking down, slowly but inevitably, and there's nothing you can do to stop it. Scurvy is the nightmare. Every sailor knows about scurvy. The symptoms start subtly. Your muscles ache. You bruise easily, dark purple bruises that appear for no reason and take forever to fade. Then it gets worse. Your gums start to swell and bleed. Your teeth become loose in their sockets. Old wounds, scars from injuries that healed long ago, start to reopen. Your skin bruises at the slightest touch. You develop spots on your legs, red and purple, spreading like some terrible flower blooming on your flesh. If scurvy progresses far enough, you start to fall apart, literally. Your teeth fall out. Your wounds won't heal. You bleed internally, blood pooling under your skin. You become too weak to work, too weak even to leave your hammock. You lie there, watching your body betray you, knowing that without fresh food, without vitamin C, though you don't know it's called, that you're going to die. The truly horrible thing about scurvy is that it's preventable. Fresh fruits and vegetables cure it. The officers know this, or at least suspect it, but fresh fruits and vegetables spoil quickly, and you're often weeks from any port. So scurvy becomes an accepted risk, a routine killer. On a long voyage, you can expect to lose a quarter of your crew to scurvy. It's factored into the planning, the way a business might factor in expected losses. You watch men die of scurvy, and it's a terrible death. They waste away, becoming skeletal, their skin yellowing, their breath taking on a peculiar sweet smell that signals the end is near. They're lucid almost to the end, aware of what's happening to them, unable to stop it. They die in their hammocks, and their bodies are sewn into canvas and dumped overboard, and their ration is divided among the survivors, and life continues. But scurvy isn't the only nutritional horror. There's beriberi, from lack of thiamine, which makes your legs swell and your heart race. There's pellagra, from lack of niacin, which causes skin lesions and dementia. There's night blindness from lack of vitamin A. Your body needs things the diet doesn't provide, and so your body slowly fails. And then there's simple starvation, which happens when supplies run out entirely. When the hardtack is gone, when the salt meat is gone, when even the rats start to look like food. Yes, rats. When you're truly desperate, you eat rats. You catch them, kill them, skin them, roast them over a fire. Rat meat is stringy and gamey, but it's meat. It's protein. It's something. You eat leather when there's nothing else. Belts, shoes, anything made of animal hide. You boil it to soften it, then chew it slowly, extracting whatever nutrition might be left. It's not much, but it's something. It keeps you alive a little longer. You drink your own urine when the water runs out. This is real, documented history. Sailors dying of thirst would drink their urine, which provides some fluid, though it's increasingly concentrated with waste products and ultimately hastens dehydration. But when you're that thirsty, when your tongue has swollen in your mouth and your lips are cracked and bleeding, you'll drink anything. These are the extremes, the worst-case scenarios. But even on a routine voyage, even when supplies are adequate, the food is still terrible. It's still barely adequate to sustain life. You're always hungry, always malnourished, always one disaster away from genuine starvation. The hunger becomes part of who you are. A background noise you learn to ignore because paying attention to it would drive you insane. You dream about food. Everyone does. In your sleep, you feast. You eat bread with butter, meat that's tender and flavorful, vegetables crisp and fresh. You eat fruit so ripe the juice runs down your chin. You eat cakes and pastries, things you haven't tasted in years, things you may never taste again. And then you wake up, and there's your hardtack, and your salt meat, and your weevils, and another day of hunger. This is what keeps you barely alive. This is the fuel that's supposed to power you through the back-breaking labor of sailing, through the violence of boarding actions, through the storms and the heat and all the other miseries. Your body is an engine, and the fuel is terrible, and the engine is slowly breaking down. But you keep eating, keep choking down the weevils and the salt and the rot, because the alternative is death, and you're not ready to die yet. You're not sure what you're living for anymore, but you're not ready to stop. disease and injury, your body breaking down. It starts with a scratch. Just a small cut on your hand from a frayed rope, the kind of minor injury you wouldn't have thought twice about in your old life. You rinse it with seawater, which is what everyone does, and you go back to work. 2 days later, the skin around the cut is red and hot to the touch. 3 days later, it's swollen, and there's pus oozing from the wound. 4 days later, red streaks are running up your arm, and you're burning with fever. This is how it happens. This is how men die at sea, not from dramatic battles or storms, but from a scratch that gets infected. Infection is the invisible killer aboard a pirate ship, more deadly than any naval vessel or storm. Everything is contaminated. The water you wash with is brackish and full of bacteria. The air below deck is thick with mold, spores, and disease. The ropes you handle are caked with salt, tar, and the bodily fluids of everyone who's handled them before you. Your clothes haven't been properly washed in months. Your hands are never clean. Every surface you touch, every tool you use, every piece of equipment, all of it is crawling with microorganisms, waiting for an opportunity to invade your body. And opportunities are everywhere. Your hands are covered in small cuts and rope burns from hauling lines. Your feet have blisters that pop and weep. Your skin is chafed raw in places where wet clothing rubs constantly under your arms, between your legs, anywhere cloth meets skin in prolonged friction. Every one of these minor wounds is a doorway for infection, and in the filthy environment of the ship, infection is almost inevitable. The ship's surgeon, if you're lucky enough to have one, is not what you'd call a doctor. He's usually a barber surgeon at best, someone who knows how to pull teeth and let blood and not much else. More often, the role falls to the carpenter, because the carpenter has saws and knows how to use them, and surgery at sea is mostly about sawing. There are no antibiotics. There's no understanding of germ theory. The best medical knowledge of the era amounts to keep the wound clean, impossible. Rest also impossible when there's work to do, and pray. Your infected hand is getting worse. The swelling has spread past your wrist. The fever is making you delirious. You can smell the wound now, a sickly sweet rot that makes your stomach turn. The surgeon looks at it, prods it with fingers that are no cleaner than anything else on the ship, and makes his diagnosis. The infection is spreading too fast. If it reaches your shoulder, you'll die. The hand has to come off. There's no anesthesia. Rum is all you get, as much as you can drink in the minutes before the surgery. You drink until your head swims, until the world tilts, but it's not enough. It's never enough. They tie you down to the table, just a board across 2 barrels. Really, because you will thrash, you will fight, even though you've consented to this, even though you know it's necessary. The body's survival instinct doesn't care about logical decisions. When the saw touches your wrist, you will try to escape, and the ropes are there to prevent that. 4 men hold you down just to be sure. 1 sits on your chest to pin your arms. 1 holds your legs. The surgeon positions his saw. It's not a medical instrument. It's literally the carpenter's saw. Maybe wiped clean, maybe not. He cuts quickly because speed is mercy. The saw blade bites into your flesh through skin and muscle. The pain is unlike anything you've ever experienced. A white-hot agony that obliterates thought, obliterates everything except the desperate animal need to make it stop. You scream. Everyone screams. The men holding you look away, but they don't let go. The saw reaches bone, and the sound changes, becomes a grinding scrape that you feel in your teeth. The surgeon is experienced at this. He's done it a dozen times before, so he's efficient. The whole thing takes maybe 2 minutes, but those 2 minutes stretch into an eternity. Time stops meaning anything when you're in that much pain. The hand comes off. You see it, detached, lying on the deck, still recognizably your hand, but no longer part of you. There's blood everywhere, more blood than you thought you had. The surgeon works quickly now, tying off blood vessels with silk thread if he has it, or just regular thread if he doesn't. Then comes the worst part, cauterization. A piece of iron heated in the fire until it glows red, pressed against the stump to sear the flesh, to stop the bleeding. The smell of your own meat cooking joins the other smells of the ship. You've passed out by now, thankfully. Your body has reached its limit and granted you the mercy of unconsciousness. When you wake, you're in your hammock. Your arm ends in a bandaged stump. The pain is still there, somehow worse, now a throbbing, burning agony that radiates up your arm, into your shoulder, your neck, your jaw. They give you more rum. It doesn't help much. You lie there, sweating through the fever, waiting to see if the infection will continue spreading despite the amputation. Half of the men who undergo amputation die anyway, from shock or infection or blood loss. You might be one of them. You won't know for days. According to the ship's articles, you're now owed 600 pieces of 8 or 6 slaves for the loss of your right hand. That's your compensation, your disability insurance. It sounds like a lot until you realize that you're now significantly less useful to the crew. You can still work. After a fashion men learn to function with missing limbs, but you're slower, weaker, less valuable. Your share of future plunders might be reduced. Some crews are generous to their wounded. Others are not. You've traded your hand for your life, and you hope the bargain was worth it. But amputation is only one of many medical horrors awaiting you. Let's talk about tropical diseases, because the Caribbean is a breeding ground for illnesses that European bodies have no resistance to. Yellow fever is the nightmare. It's called yellowjack by sailors, and its arrival on a ship can decimate the crew within weeks. It starts with fever and chills, which you might mistake for any number of common ailments. Then comes the yellowing. Your skin takes on a jaundiced tinge. Your eyes turn yellow. Your liver is failing. You vomit, and the vomit is black with digested blood. You bleed from your gums, your nose, your bowels. Your organs are liquefying inside you, and there's nothing anyone can do except watch. You die in agony over the course of a week. Yellow fever is carried by mosquitoes. But nobody knows this in 1715. They think it's miasma, bad air, divine punishment, anything but the truth. So they take no precautions against mosquitoes, which breed prolifically in the standing water barrels, in the bilge, in every damp corner of the ship. When yellow fever strikes, it tears through the crew. You watch men die, one after another, their bodies thrown overboard, and you wonder if you'll be next. There's no pattern to who lives and who dies. It seems random, capricious, like the disease is choosing victims by lottery. Malaria is another gift of the Caribbean. It's less immediately deadly than yellow fever, but it's chronic. Once you have malaria, you have it forever. The fever comes in cycles, racking you with chills and sweats, making you delirious. You might have weeks of feeling relatively normal, and then the fever returns, knocking you flat. Over time, it weakens you, makes you susceptible to other diseases, gradually saps your strength until some other illness finishes you off. The treatment for malaria, if you're lucky enough to be on a ship that has it, is cinchona bark, the source of quinine. It's expensive and rare, but it works, or at least helps. More often, you don't have cinchona bark, so you just endure the fevers, lying in your hammock, shaking so hard your teeth chatter, wrapped in every scrap of cloth you own, while still somehow sweating. The crew works around you. There's no sick leave. If you can't work, you don't eat, except that actually you do eat, because pirates take care of their own, mostly. But you feel guilty, lying there useless, while others do your share of the labor. Dysentery is so common, it's almost unremarkable. Everyone gets dysentery at some point. It's a question of when, not if. It's caused by contaminated food and water, which describes everything you consume. The symptoms are brutal. Severe diarrhea, often bloody, stomach cramps that double you over, fever, dehydration. You spend your days running to the bucket, or not making it to the bucket, losing fluids faster than you can replace them. Your body weight drops. Your eyes sink into your skull. Your skin becomes loose and dry. The treatment is rest and clean water, neither of which is really available. So you just survive it, if you're going to survive it. Many don't. Dehydration kills quickly, especially in the heat. You watch men waste away, their bodies emptying themselves until there's nothing left. It's an undignified way to die, and it's shockingly common. Typhus comes with the lice and fleas that infest every man aboard. It starts with fever and headache, then progresses to a rash that spreads across your body. Your mind goes confusion, delirium, hallucinations. You see things that aren't there. You have conversations with people who aren't present or who are dead. In your lucid moments, you're aware that you're losing your grip on reality, which is its own special terror. Typhus kills about 20% of those who contract it, and there's no treatment. You either survive or you don't. Then there are the injuries from the work itself. Sailing a ship in the age of sail is brutally physical labor, and accidents are constant. Ropes under tension snap and whip across the deck, breaking bones, lacerating flesh, sometimes cutting men in half. Spars fall from rigging, crushing whoever's beneath them. Men fall from the rigging, plummeting to the deck or into the sea. Those who hit the deck usually die from the impact. Those who hit the water might survive the fall, but if the ship is moving fast or the seas are rough, they're left behind. You hear them calling out, see them receding in the distance, and there's nothing you can do. The ship can't stop, won't stop, for one man. Hernias are epidemic among sailors. The constant, heavy lifting, hauling on ropes, moving cargo, it's more than the human body is designed to handle. Your intestines push through weakened abdominal muscles, creating bulges in your groin or belly. In the worst cases, the hernia strangulates, cutting off blood flow to the trapped intestine, which then dies. That's a death sentence. The pain is excruciating, and there's no surgery that can fix it. You die over the course of days, your abdomen swelling, your skin turning gray, your body poisoning itself with dead tissue. Splinters are another constant hazard. The ship is made of wood, rough wood, and splinters are everywhere. You get them in your hands, your feet, embedded so deep you can't pull them out. They fester and become infected. A splinter in your finger can lead to losing the finger. A splinter in your foot can lead to losing the foot. During battle, when cannonballs smash into the wooden hull, they create showers of enormous splinters, foot-long shards of wood that become missiles, impaling men, tearing through flesh. More men are killed by splinters in naval battles than by the cannonballs themselves. Your teeth are rotting. Everyone's teeth are rotting. The diet lacks vitamin C, which leads to scurvy, which leads to gum disease. Your gums bleed when you eat, when you brush them with a frayed stick, sometimes spontaneously. Your teeth are loose in their sockets. Some have already fallen out. You can feel the others moving when you touch them with your tongue. Eventually they'll all go, and you'll be toothless at 30. Unable to chew the tough salt meat, relegated to soaking everything in water until it's soft enough to gum. The ship's surgeon, such as he is, can pull teeth. That's one of his primary functions, actually. Toothaches are common and agonizing, and the only treatment is extraction. He uses pliers, the same ones used for other purposes, and he pulls. Sometimes the tooth comes out clean. Sometimes it breaks, leaving roots embedded in the jawbone, which then get infected. Sometimes he pulls the wrong tooth. There's no precision to it, no real skill beyond brute force. Sunburn is a given. You're working in tropical sun for hours every day, and there's no sunscreen, no protective clothing beyond whatever you're already wearing. Your skin burns, blisters, peels, and burns again. The white men on the crew, especially those with fair skin, suffer terribly. Some develop skin cancers, ugly lesions that grow and ulcerate. There's no treatment for cancer beyond cutting it out, and that only works if you catch it early and if the surgeon is willing to try. Your eyes suffer too. The constant glare off the water, the salt spray, the tropical sun, it all takes a toll. Many sailors develop cataracts young, their vision gradually clouding until they're functionally blind. Others get infections, conjunctivitis, trachomad, that leave them with scarred corneas and impaired vision. Good eyesight is essential for the work. So losing your vision means losing your value to the crew. And then there are the parasites. Oh, the parasites. You have worms, intestinal worms, probably multiple species. Everyone does. They came from the contaminated food and water, and now they live inside you, stealing nutrients, making you even more malnourished than you already are. You can feel them sometimes, moving in your gut. You pass them in your stool, long white worms that are disturbingly alive. The treatment is herbs, if you have them, or just living with it if you don't. Some worms can grow feet long inside you. Your skin hosts its own ecosystem. Beyond the lice and fleas, you have fungal infections, foot, jock, itch, ringworm. The constant dampness creates perfect conditions for fungi to thrive. Your feet are especially bad. They're always wet, always in contact with the filthy deck. The skin between your toes cracks and weeps. Fungal infections spread. Your toenails thicken and discolor, sometimes falling off entirely. Tropical ulcers develop on your legs, usually starting from minor cuts or insect bites. The humid environment prevents healing. The ulcers expand, becoming crater-like sores that eat into the flesh. They're painful and disgusting, oozing pus and blood, attracting flies. If they get deep enough, they reach the bone, and then you're looking at amputation again. The ulcers can last for months or years, chronic wounds that never quite heal. You're in constant pain. Everyone is. Your back aches from the labor and from sleeping in a hammock. Your hands are swollen and stiff from rope burns and repetitive strain. Your joints hurt from the dampness and from old injuries that never healed properly. Your head aches from dehydration and poor nutrition. Your stomach hurts from the bad food and the parasites. Your teeth hurt. Your skin hurts. Everything hurts all the time, and there's no relief. Rum helps a little, but there's never enough rum to really dull the pain. Sleep is difficult because of the pain and the discomfort, and the noise and the heat and the constant motion of the ship. You're perpetually exhausted, running on insufficient rest, which makes you more susceptible to illness and injury. It's a vicious cycle. The worse you feel, the harder it is to sleep. The less you sleep, the worse you feel. And through all of this, you're expected to work. The ship doesn't run itself. The sails need constant adjustment. The deck needs swabbing. The rigging needs maintenance. The guns need to be ready. There's always work, and it's hard physical labor. And you're doing it while malnourished, diseased, injured, and exhausted. You do it because you have to, because everyone else is doing it, because the alternative is letting down your brothers and possibly endangering the ship. You're 28 years old, and your body is falling apart. You look 50. Your hair is thin and gray. Your skin is weathered and scarred. You're missing teeth, and you're developing a cataract in one eye. Your hands are gnarled and calloused. You walk with a limp from an old injury that never healed right. This is what piracy does to you. This is the physical cost of the life you chose, and you're one of the lucky ones because you're still alive. You've survived injuries and diseases that killed others. You've endured suffering that would have broken weaker men. You've adapted to a level of physical misery that would have seemed unimaginable in your old life. You've become hard in body and spirit because that's what survival requires. But there's a cost beyond the physical. The constant pain, the witnessing of others suffering, the knowledge that you might be next it changes you psychologically. You become numb to suffering, your own and others. You have to, or you'd go mad. Compassion becomes a luxury you can't afford. Empathy exhausts you. You focus on your own survival and try not to think too much about anything else. This is your body now. This is what's left of it. And every day it breaks down a little more, and you patch it together as best you can, and you keep going, because what else can you do? You're in too deep to turn back. You're in too much pain to give up. You're in a trap of your own making, and the only way out is death, and you're not ready for that yet. So you endure. You survive another day, and then another, and you try not to think about how much longer you can keep this up. The violence you witnessed, and CIOMIT Ted, the merchant ship, appears on the horizon at dawn, her sails bright against the rising sun. Your ship, which has been flying false Calaza French flag, maybe, or Spanish, whatever seemed most likely to avoid suspicion, now runs up the black flag. The Jolly Roger, they call it, though every ship has its own variation. Yours shows a skeleton holding an hourglass in one hand and a spear pointing to a bleeding heart in the other. The message is clear. Your time is running out and death is coming. This is your first boarding action. You've been aboard for 6 weeks now, long enough to learn the ropes, to understand the rhythms of the ship, but not long enough to have experienced real violence. You've heard the stories, of course. You've listened to the veterans describe previous captures, always with a bravado that masks something darker in their eyes. But hearing about violence and experiencing it are different things. And you're about to learn that difference. The tension on your ship is electric. Men are checking their weapons, sharpening blades, loading pistols. The gunner is preparing the cannons, though the hope is you won't need them. Cannon fire damages the prize ship and destroys valuable cargo. The goal is to frighten the merchant into surrendering without a fight, and that's what the black flag is for. It means, surrender now and you'll be treated fairly. Resist and you'll be slaughtered. The merchant ship tries to run. They always try to run first. Your ship is faster, though pirates choose their vessels carefully, favoring speed over cargo capacity. You close the distance steadily. As you get nearer, a warning shot is fired across the merchant's bow. The cannonball splashes into the sea 20 yards in front of them. The message is clear. The next one won't miss. The merchant captain makes his decision. You see their flag coming down. They're surrendering. There's a collective exhale on your ship, a release of tension. No battle today. The veterans seem almost disappointed. They were ready for violence, keyed up for it, and now they have to stand down. But you're relieved. You're not ready to kill anyone yet. Your ship pulls alongside the merchant. Grappling hooks are thrown. The two vessels lashed together. Then you're climbing over the rail with 30 other men, landing on the merchant's deck with weapons drawn. This is the moment you're committing piracy. You're an armed man, illegally boarding a vessel with intent to rob. Everything you feared about what you'd become is now reality. The merchant crew is gathered on deck, hands raised, terrified. They're just sailors, like you used to be, working men trying to survive. The captain stands slightly apart, trying to maintain some dignity despite his position. He's older, maybe 50, with the weathered look of someone who's spent his life at sea. His eyes are calculating, trying to figure out how this will go, whether he and his men will survive. Your captain addresses the merchant captain. The conversation is almost businesslike. Where's the cargo manifest? Where's the strongbox? Any passengers aboard? The merchant captain hesitates, and one of your crewmates strikes him across the face with the flat of a cutlass. Not hard enough to seriously injure, but hard enough to make the point. Cooperation will be rewarded. Resistance will be punished. The merchant captain talks. He produces the manifest, reveals the strongbox location, admits there are 3 passengers below a merchant and his wife and daughter. Traveling to Charlestown, your crew fans out, some heading below to secure the cargo hold, others searching the cabins, still others guarding the merchant crew to prevent any heroics. You're part of the group guarding the crew, and this is when you realize how terrifying you are to these men. They look at you with naked fear. You're holding a cutlass, your face probably twisted into what you hope is a menacing expression, and to them, you're death personified. You're a pirate, a monster from their nightmares, and you might kill them at any moment. The power is intoxicating and nauseating at once. You've never had anyone fear you like this before. One of the merchant sailors is young, maybe 16, and he's crying silently, tears streaming down his face as he tries not to make any sound that might draw attention. You want to tell him it's okay, that you won't hurt him, that you're not really a monster. But you don't, because that would undermine the fear, and the fear is what keeps this orderly. If they think you're soft, someone might try something stupid, and then people would die. So you let him cry and hate yourself a little for it. The search below deck takes about 30 minutes. Your crew is efficient, experienced at this. They find the strongbox, which contains a modest amount of coin, maybe 1,000 pieces of 8 total, which will be divided among the crew according to shares. They find some valuable cargo, spices, textiles, sugar, tobacco. Not a fortune, but a decent haul. And they find the passengers. The merchant and his family are brought on deck. The man is portly and well-dressed, clearly someone of means. His wife clutches their daughter, a girl of maybe 14, both of them pale with terror. This is what you signed up for, isn't it? Robbing the rich, taking from those who have plenty. It seemed more noble in the abstract. Face to face with a terrified child, it feels less like revolution and more like bullying. Your captain questions the merchant. What valuables are you carrying? Money, jewelry? Don't lie to me. The merchant stammers out and answers some coins. His wife's jewelry, that's all. Your captain nods to one of the crew, who searches them, not gently. The wife's jewelry is taken rings, a necklace, earrings. Not extraordinarily valuable, but worth something. The merchant hands over his coin purse. Then comes the question that makes everyone tense. Anyone want to join us? Any of you lads tired of working for nothing, interested in taking shares instead of wages? This is standard practice. Pirates usually offer merchant crews the chance to join up. It's partly practical. They need to replace losses in, partly ideological. They're offering freedom, or what passes for it. Most of the merchant crew shakes their heads quickly. They want no part of this. But 2 young sailors step forward. They're making the same calculation you made weeks ago. Terrible certainty versus uncertain possibility. They sign the articles that very day, right there on the deck of the captured ship. You wonder if they'll regret it, if they'll end up like you, trapped in a life that seemed better than the alternative, but really isn't. The valuable cargo is transferred to your ship. This takes hours heavy work, hauling crates and barrels across the gap between vessels. The merchant crew is forced to help, speeding the process. They do so sullenly, but without resistance. They know the rules: cooperate and live, resist and die. The merchant captain watches his livelihood being stolen, his face a mask of controlled rage and despair. He's probably ruined by this. The cargo wasn't his. He was transporting it for someone else, and that someone will hold him responsible for the loss. He might never captain another ship. This one encounter with you has destroyed his career, possibly his life. You try not to think about that. You try to focus on your share of the plunder, on how this haul means better food for a few weeks, maybe some rum, maybe even a new shirt. You try not to see these people as fully human, with lives and families and futures you're damaging. It's easier that way. The veterans have taught you this. Don't think too much. Don't empathize. Do your job and move on. Once the cargo is transferred, there's a discussion about what to do with the merchant ship itself. Sometimes prizes are kept and added to the pirate fleet if they're valuable enough. Sometimes they're stripped of anything useful and then scuttled. Sometimes they're left intact, allowed to continue their journey, minus their cargo. The decision depends on practicalities. Do you have enough crew to man another ship? Is the vessel worth keeping? How much do you want to hurt the shipping company that owns it? This time, the decision is to let them go. The merchant ship isn't particularly valuable, and you don't have crew to spare. The passengers and crew are released, warned not to report what happened until they reach port, though everyone knows they'll report immediately. The merchant captain is told if he follows or tries anything heroic, you'll come back and sink him. He nods. He's not a fool. He's survived. His crew has survived, and that's victory enough. The ships separate. You watch the merchant vessel limping away, and you feel a complex mixture of relief and guilt. No one died today. No one was even seriously hurt beyond that one blow to the captain's face. By pirate standards, by the standards of your world, this was a gentle encounter, almost civilized. The stories you've heard often end much worse, but not all encounters are this clean. A week later, you chase another merchant ship. This captain doesn't surrender. Maybe he's braver than most, or more foolish. Maybe he's carrying something so valuable he can't bear to lose it. Maybe he has personal reasons to hate pirates. Whatever his motivation, he runs out his guns and prepares to fight. The battle is nothing like you imagined. It's not glorious or exciting. It's chaos and terror and noise beyond anything you've experienced. The merchant fires first a broadside that tears through your rigging and kills 2 men instantly. You see it happen, see them there one moment and gone the next. One torn in half by a cannonball, the other impaled by the enormous splinter you learned about, a 6-foot shard of wood through his chest. Your ship returns fire. The cannons roar, the smoke is thick and blinding, and you can't see anything, can't hear anything beyond the ringing in your ears. Your job is to prepare for boarding, to be ready when the ships close, but right now you're just trying not to die. Another broadside from the merchant, and this time the cannonball passes 3 feet from your head. You feel the air pressure, the heat of it. Another foot to the left and you'd be dead. The ships close. Grappling hooks are thrown. Men are screaming, battle cries, death screams, orders that can't be heard over the noise. You're climbing over the rail with the others, and now you're on the merchant's deck, and there are men with weapons trying to kill you, and you're trying to kill them. And it's all instinct. Number thought. You've never killed anyone before. You've never even seriously hurt anyone. But now you're swinging your cutlass at a man's head, and he's blocking it, and he's swinging back at you. And it's not skill, it's just desperation. 2 terrified men trying to survive. Your blade catches him on the arm, cuts through his sleeve, and there's blood. And he's screaming. And you hit him again, and this time it's his head, and he goes down. You don't know if he's dead. You don't stop to check. There are other men, other threats. The battle is a blur of violence that lasts maybe 5 minutes, but feels like hours. And then suddenly it's over. The merchant crew is surrendering, throwing down their weapons, and you're standing there, covered in blood, some yours, some not, shaking with adrenaline and shock and horror at what you've just done. The aftermath is worse than the battle. 4 of your crew are dead, 8 wounded. The merchant crew fared worse at least 10 dead, many wounded. The deck is slippery with blood. Bodies are everywhere. Some are clearly dead, but others are dying slowly, crying out for help, for water, for their mothers. The merchant captain is dead, killed in the first minutes of fighting. Without his leadership, his crew folded quickly. Your captain is furious. This didn't have to happen. If the merchant had surrendered, everyone would have survived. Instead, men died for a cargo that you're taking anyway. The resistance achieved nothing except suffering. This is the logic of piracy. Surrender and live, resist and die. The merchant captain gambled and lost, and his crew paid the price. The wounded are tended to, yours first, then theirs. The dead are stripped of anything valuable, boots, clothes, weapons. Their bodies are thrown overboard with minimal ceremony. You watch men you've worked alongside for weeks disappear into the sea, and you feel nothing. You're numb, in shock. Your brain can't process what's just happened. That night, back on your ship, someone hands you a bottle of rum. You drink until your hands stop shaking, until you can almost forget the sound of that man's skull cracking under your blade, until you can almost sleep. But the memory stays. It will always stay. You've crossed a line that can't be uncrossed. You've killed a man. Maybe he would have killed you first, probably he would have. But that doesn't make the weight any lighter. This is the reality of piracy. It's not adventure or freedom. It's violence, sudden and brutal and traumatizing. It's killing people who've done nothing to you, whose only crime is being in your way. It's becoming someone you never wanted to be because survival demands it. And the worst part, this becomes normal. After the third boarding, the fifth, the 10th, you stop feeling much of anything. The violence becomes routine, just another part of the job. You learn to shut off the part of your brain that questions or regrets. You become efficient at inflicting harm. You become good at it because being good at it keeps you alive. The veterans, the ones who've been doing this for years, they're different. There's something missing behind their eyes, some essential humanity worn away by repeated exposure to violence. They can kill without hesitation, without remorse. They laugh about it afterward, tell stories about men they've killed as if recounting a particularly good meal. You used to think they were monsters. Now you understand they're just what this life makes you. If you do it long enough, you're becoming one of them. You can feel it happening, feel yourself hardening, feel the compassion leaking away. There's a man inside you who's horrified by what you're doing, who's screaming at you to stop, to find another way. But that man's voice gets quieter each day, drowned out by the necessities of survival and the camaraderie of shared violence. This is what piracy costs. Not just your health, not just your future, but your soul, bit by bit, until you're not sure there's anything left worth saving. And you can't stop, because stopping means leaving, and leaving means hanging. You're trapped in a cycle of violence, both perpetrator and victim, and there's no way out except death. Welcome to the reality of pirate life. This is what you chose, though you didn't understand what you were choosing. This is what you've become. The illusion of freedom and democracy *. There's a meeting tonight. The captain has called all hands to gather on deck after the evening meal, which means something important is being decided. This is the democracy you heard about, the famous pirate equality that made this life seem appealing. Every man gets a vote. Every voice matters. It's revolutionary, really. In a world where kings and aristocrats rule by divine right and common men are expected to obey without question, you assemble with the others under a sky full of stars. The tropical night is warm, and there's a gentle breeze that almost makes the meeting pleasant. The captain stands on a raised platform and overturned crateso. Everyone can see him. The quartermaster stands beside him with a list of items to be discussed and voted on. This is how decisions are made aboard a pirate ship, collectively, democratically, with each man's vote carrying equal weight. The first item is the course. The captain wants to head south toward the South American coast where Spanish galleons travel heavy with silver from the mines. It's a rich hunting ground, but it's also dangerous. The Spanish guard those routes carefully, and their warships are formidable. The quartermaster presents the alternative. Stay in the Caribbean. Hit smaller merchants. Take less risk for smaller rewards. The debate is surprisingly sophisticated. Men argue for both sides, weighing risk versus reward. Considering the ship's current state of supply, discussing the likelihood of encountering naval patrols, you realize these aren't just ignorant criminals. They're men who understand navigation, trade routes, naval tactics. Some of them are quite intelligent, educated even, driven to piracy not by stupidity but by lack of other options. The vote is called. All in favor of heading south. Hands go up are counted. All in favor of staying in the Caribbean. More hands. The quartermaster tallies the results. The vote is close, but heading south wins by a margin of 3. So south you'll go, even though nearly half the crew preferred the safer option. This is democracy in action. Majority rule. Minority acceptance. The second item is discipline. One of the crew, a man named Jenkins, has been accused of stealing from his fellow pirates. Specifically, he took another man's boots while that man was sleeping. The accuser presents his case. The boots were his, unique enough to be identifiable, and he found them in Jenkins's possession. Jenkins denies it weakly, claims they're his own boots, but his story doesn't hold up under questioning. This is a serious offense. The articles explicitly forbid stealing from your brothers. The penalty, according to the code, is marooning, but there's room for interpretation, for mercy. The crew must decide, strict enforcement or leniency. Jenkins pleads his case. He's been with the crew for 8 months, fought bravely in 3 actions, never caused trouble before. He claims it was a moment of weakness, that his own boots had fallen apart and he needed replacements. He's sorry. He'll make restitution. The debate is heated. Some men argue for mercy. Everyone makes mistakes, and Jenkins has otherwise been a good crewmate. Others argue for strict enforcement. The rules exist for a reason, and if you let one theft slide, others will follow. The accuser is particularly vehement. Justice must be done, or what's the point of having rules? You're asked to vote on the punishment. Option 1, marooning on the nearest island with a bottle of water and a pistol with 1 shot. Option 2, severe flogging, 40 lashes, and loss of shares from the last prize. Option 3, lesser punishment, 10 lashes, and required restitution of value. The vote is taken. Majority chooses option 2, severe, flogging and loss of shares. Jenkins's punishment is carried out immediately. He's tied to the mast, his shirt removed, his back exposed. The bosun wields the Cat-O-9 tails a whip with 9 knotted cords that shred flesh with each strike. You're required to watch. Everyone is. This is meant to be instructive, a reminder of consequences. The first strike lands with a crack that echoes across the silent deck. Jenkins gasps, but doesn't scream. Red lines bloom across his back. The second strike crosses the first, creating a crosshatch pattern of broken skin. By the 10th strike, he's screaming. By the 20th, he's barely conscious. By the 40th, his back is a mass of bleeding tissue. And he's been screaming so long, he has no voice left. They cut him down and carry him below. He'll survive, probably, though infection is always a risk. But he's learned his lesson, and so has everyone else. The democracy has teeth. The rules are enforced. This is the social contract of piracy. Everyone agrees to the code, and everyone suffers the consequences of breaking it. This is what democracy means here. It's not gentle or forgiving. It's not about individual rights or protecting minorities. It's about collective survival, and anything that threatens the collective gets crushed. You have a vote, yes, but that vote is used to punish as often as to reward, to enforce conformity as much as to respect dissent. The third item on tonight's agenda is the captain himself. Someone has called for a vote of no confidence. This is the ultimate expression of pirate democracy. The crew can remove their captain at any time if they feel he's not doing his job well. The challenger is the bosun, a man named Rackham, who's been with this crew longer than the current captain. Rackham presents his case. The captain has been too cautious, passing up prizes that were worth taking, prioritizing safety over profit. The recent haul was modest, and before that, they went 6 weeks without capturing anything. Men are getting restless, hungry, poor. The captain has lost his nerve, Rackham claims, and needs to be replaced by someone bolder. The captain defends himself. His caution has kept the crew alive. Yes, the recent haul was modest, but they took it without casualties. Yes, they passed up some prizes, but those prizes were too well defended, and attacking them would have meant dead men for uncertain reward. He's been doing his job, keeping them alive and moderately prosperous, and doesn't deserve removal. The debate continues for over an hour. Men shout questions at both candidates. What's your plan for improving our fortunes? How would you handle encountering a naval frigate? What's your position on dividing prize ships versus scuttling them? This is a job interview conducted by committee, and it's surprisingly thorough. Finally, the vote is called. All in favor of retaining the current captain. Hands go up. All in favor of replacing him with Rackham. More hands. The quartermaster counts carefully. The result, the current captain retains his position by a margin of 7 votes. Rackham accepts the decision with reasonable grace, though you can see he's disappointed. The captain thanks the crew for their confidence and promises to be more aggressive in seeking prizes. This is pirate democracy at its finest, a peaceful transfer of power, or, in this case, peaceful retention of power. No monarchy, no inherited authority, just men choosing their leader based on competence and results. It's genuinely remarkable, especially in the context of the 18th century, when most of the world is ruled by kings who claim divine right to their thrones. But here's what you're beginning to understand. This democracy exists within a prison. Yes, you can vote. Yes, Your voice matters. But you're voting on which victims to rob, which risks to take with your lives, how to divide plunder from crimes. You're free to choose your captain, but you're not free to choose anything else. You can't vote to stop being pirates. You can't vote to return to legitimate society. You can't vote to undo the choices that led you here. The freedom you have is the freedom of prisoners deciding which corner of the cell to occupy. It's real freedom in its way, more than you had in your old life. But it's freedom within such narrow constraints that calling it freedom feels almost like a joke. And there are limits to the democracy. Certain things aren't voted on. The ship's articles, once agreed to, can't be easily changed. The fundamental structure, captain, quartermaster, specific officer roles, fixed. The division of shares is predetermined. You can vote on applying the rules, but not on changing them. It's democracy within a rigid framework, not democracy to reshape that framework. The brotherhood is real, though you've come to understand that these men will fight for you, die for you, if necessary. When you were injured last Wicca, rope burn that got infected, they cared for you, shared their rum, made sure you got your rations, even though you couldn't work. That solidarity is genuine. It's born of shared suffering and shared danger, but it's real. The former slaves aboard have found something here they never had: equality. There's a man named Caesar who was enslaved on a plantation in Barbados until he escaped and joined this crew. He's treated like any other crew member. He votes. He receives equal shares. No one calls him property or treats him as less than human. For him, piracy represents genuine liberation, and you can see it in the way he carries himself, with a dignity that slavery denied him. But even Caesar is trapped. He can never return to normal society. He's a fugitive slave and a pirate, doubly condemned. His freedom exists only in this narrow channel, only among these men, only on this ship. Step outside these boundaries, and he's property again, or a criminal, or both. His liberation is real, but desperately fragile. The egalitarianism extends to wealth, theoretically. Everyone shares equally in the plunder. No one hoards resources, while others starve. If there's food, everyone eats. If there's rum, everyone drinks. It's a kind of primitive communism, and it works surprisingly well. There's no resentment over inequality, because there is no inequality, at least not of the dramatic kind that exists in normal society. But the equality only extends so far. The captain and officers still get larger shares, not enormously larger, but larger. More importantly, some men are more valuable than others. The skilled navigator, the experienced gunner, the carpenter who keeps the ship afloat, they matter more. They're not formally ranked above common sailors, but everyone knows their worth. If supplies get short, these men will eat first, drink first, because losing them could doom the entire crew. And the democracy can be overridden in emergencies. If the ship is in immediate danger in battle, in a storm, in any crisis, the captain has absolute authority. Democracy is a luxury for calm seas and safe harbors. When survival is on the line, you need quick decisions and instant obedience, and the democratic process is too slow. So the freedom you have is conditional, revocable, at any moment when circumstances demand it. You're also beginning to see the dark side of democratic decision-making. Mobs make terrible decisions sometimes. When emotions run high, when fear or anger dominates, the vote doesn't necessarily produce wise results. You've seen the crew vote to attack a prize that was obviously too well defended, resulting in casualties that could have been avoided. You've seen them vote to severely punish someone for a minor offense because everyone was in a bad mood that day. Democracy amplifies collective wisdom, but it also amplifies collective stupidity and cruelty. There's also the problem that this bureaucracy is exclusively for the pirates. The merchant sailors you rob, the passengers you terrorize, the innocent people whose lives you disrupt, they get no vote. Your freedom and equality come at their expense. You're a democracy of criminals, and your democratic decisions often involve inflicting suffering on people who have no say in the matter. This bothers you more than you expected. You thought you'd be Robin Hood, stealing from the rich to give to the poor, but you're stealing from merchants who are often just middle class, and you're keeping everything for yourself. You're not redistributing wealth to the downtrodden. You're just becoming the downtrodden who happen to have weapons. The moral clarity you expected doesn't exist. The brotherhood has its own costs. These men are your family now, but that means their fate is tied to yours in ways that aren't always comfortable. When one of your crewmates does something despicable, and they sometimes do, you're implicated by association. When the crew votes for actions you disagree with, you're bound by that decision. The collective nature of piracy means you've surrendered individual moral choice to the group. And there's a darker truth. Many of these men are not good people. Some genuinely are victims of circumstance, driven to piracy by impossible choices. But others are violent, cruel, sadistic. They enjoy the terror they inflict. They laugh about the suffering they cause. The democracy gives them equal voice, equal power, and their votes count as much as anyone's. You're in brotherhood with monsters sometimes, and that brotherhood demands loyalty even when you're disgusted by what they do. The illusion is this: you thought democracy and equality would make this bearable, would transform piracy into something noble, or at least morally neutral. But democracy doesn't change what you are. You're still criminals. You're still inflicting harm. You're still trapped in a life that will probably kill you soon. The difference is that you're trapped together democratically, as equals in misery and crime. This is your freedom, the freedom to vote on which merchant to rob next, the freedom to elect the man who leads you into danger, the freedom to punish your brothers when they break rules you all agreed to. It's real freedom, but it's freedom within a cage you built collectively. And the cage is still a cage even though you voted for every bar. Asterisk the short. Brutal careers, the end comes quickly. Asterisk, you've been a pirate for 18 months now. 18 months that feel like a lifetime. 18 months that have aged you a decade. You're one of the lucky ones, the survivors. Of the 15 men who joined the crew when you did, 6 are dead. 3 died of disease, 2 from yellow fever, 1 from dysentery so severe he dehydrated to death in 3 days. 2 died in battle, killed during a boarding action that went badly. 1 fell from the rigging during a storm, hit the deck, and died instantly, his skull crushed like an eggshell. The remaining 9 of you are still alive, but alive doesn't mean healthy or whole. 1 man lost his left leg to gangrene after an infected wound. Another is slowly going blind from cataracts and the constant glare of tropical sun. A third has scurvy, so advanced his teeth are falling out and old scars are reopening. You yourself are missing 2 fingers on your left hand, cut off by the surgeon after an infected rope burn spread up your hand. You received your 100 pieces of 8 per finger, 200 total, which you spent within a week in port on rum and food and the desperate attempt to feel something other than misery. The ship you're on isn't the same ship you joined. That vessel was captured by a Spanish man of war 9 months ago. Most of the crew was killed in the battle. Those who survived, including you, were scattered, swimming through debris, trying to reach other pirate ships or the shore. You made it to a small boat with 7 others, and eventually joined a different pirate crew. This happens constantly in the pirate world. Crews dissolve and reform. Men move between ships. The community is fluid because death and capture are constant. The statistics are brutal. The average pirate career lasts 2 to 3 years. Not 2 to 3 years before retirement, 2 to 3 years before death or capture. The life expectancy once you become a pirate is about 18 months to 3 years, depending on how careful you are and how lucky you get. You're already past the median. Every day you survive is borrowed time. You know how it will probably end. Disease is the most likely killer. It claims more pirates than battles or hangings combined. Tropical diseases, scurvy, infections from minor wounds that become major problems. You've watched enough men die from disease to know how it goes. The fever, the delirium, the gradual shutdown of systems, the final gasping breaths. It's not a good death, but at least it's relatively quick compared to some alternatives. Battle is the second most common way to die. Naval engagements with merchant ships that fight back, encounters with naval warships, attacks on coastal towns that turn out to be better defended than expected. Combat at sea is chaotic and deadly. Cannonballs tear men apart. Musket balls punch through flesh. Blades hack and stab. Men fall from rigging, drown when thrown overboard, burn when ships catch fire. You've seen all of these deaths, and any one of them could be yours the next time weapons are drawn. Drowning is another possibility. Ships sink, especially in storms. When a ship goes down, most of the men below deck don't make it out. They're trapped in that narrow space as water rushes in, and they claw at each other in the darkness, fighting for the ladder, for air, for any chance of survival. Even if you're above deck, drowning is still likely. Most sailors don't know how to swim. It's seen as tempting fate, prolonging the inevitable. If you go overboard in open ocean, you'll tread water for minutes or hours, watching your ship sail away, watching the horizon, waiting for exhaustion or a shark to end it. And then there's hanging. The fear that lives in the back of every pirate's mind, the nightmare that wakes you in the dark. Capture by authorities means trial, and trial means conviction, and conviction means the gallows. You've heard the stories from men who've witnessed pirate hangings. You know what to expect if it happens to you. The trial is a formality. Piracy is a capital crime with no gradations, no possibility of a lesser charge. If they prove you're a pirate and the evidence is usually overwhelming, you hang. The trial might last a day or two, but the outcome is predetermined. Some pirates try to argue they were forced into piracy, that they were captured and had no choice. Sometimes this defense works, but rarely. Mostly, once you're identified as a pirate, you're condemned. The time between conviction and execution is usually short, sometimes only a day. You're held in prison, often a filthy cell packed with other condemned men, waiting for your appointment with the rope. Some men spend this time drinking if they can get alcohol. Others pray, even pirates who haven't thought about God in years. Some write letters to families they'll never see again. Some just sit in silence, waiting. The execution is public, designed to be a spectacle and a warning. You're transported to the execution dock, usually at the low water mark on the Thames in London, or at similar locations in colonial ports. Crowds gather, hundreds, sometimes thousands of people. Executions are entertainment in the 18th century, a day out for families, a social event. Vendors sell food and drink. People jeer and throw things. Children watch from their parents' shoulders. You're led to the scaffold. Your hands are bound behind your back. The hangman places the noose around your neck. It's rough hemp, coarse against your skin, and you can feel how strong it is, how it won't break when it needs to hold your weight. Some men are given a chance to speak the famous last words, tradition. Some use this opportunity to repent, to warn others away from piracy. Others remain defiant to the end, cursing their executioners, declaring they'd do it all again, then the hood. If they're merciful enough to provide one, blocking out the light, the faces, giving you some privacy in your final moment. The platform drops, and you're falling, and then the rope catches you. If you're lucky, your neck breaks immediately from the fall, and death is instant. But 18th century hanging isn't the precise science it will later become. Often the drop isn't far enough to break your neck. Instead, you strangle slowly, your body kicking and convulsing, your lungs burning for air that won't come, your brain slowly starving of oxygen. It can take 15 minutes to die this way. 15 minutes of conscious suffocation while the crowd watches. Your body is left hanging through 3 tides. About 36 hours out, the low water mark. This is traditional for pirates, a display meant to warn sailors passing by what awaits those who turn to piracy. Your corpse is washed by the tides, picked at by birds, swelling and discoloring in the sun. By the time you're cut down, you're barely recognizable as human. Some pirates, the famous ones, or those whose crimes were particularly notorious, receive special treatment. Their bodies are coated in tar to preserve them, then placed in iron cages called gibbets. These cages are hung at prominent locations, harbor entrances, crossroads, anywhere people will see them. Your tarred corpse remains there for months or years, a permanent warning, slowly falling apart as weather and scavengers do their work. Your skeleton eventually scatters, bones falling through the cage bars, but the cage remains a landmark named for the pirate whose body rotted there. This is what awaits you if you're captured. And capture is increasingly likely because the authorities are cracking down. The Golden Age of Piracy is ending, though you don't fully realize it yet. Nations are dedicating more resources to hunting pirates. Naval patrols are more frequent. Former pirate havens are being cleaned up. Port Royal destroyed by earthquake. New Providence taken back by civilized authority. The safe spaces are shrinking. The most famous pirates of recent years are already dead or captured. Blackbeard was killed in battle, in 1718, his head cut off and hung from the bowsprit of the naval vessel that killed him. Charles Vane was hanged in 1720. Calico Jack Rackham was hanged in 1720. Anne Bonny and Mary Read, the famous female pirates, were captured with Rackham. Both were pregnant at trial and thus spared hanging temporarily, though Read died in prison of fever before she could be executed. The Golden Age is measured in decades, and those decades are mostly over. The period from about 1650 to 1730 saw the rise and fall of Caribbean piracy. You're living in the tail end, the declining years when hunting is harder, risks are greater, and the authorities are winning. The easy prizes are gone. The safe harbors are gone. The life expectancy, never good, is dropping even further. You know this, even if you don't think about it directly. You see it in how hard it's become to find worthwhile prizes. You see it in the increased presence of naval warships. You see it in how other crews have been captured or killed. The life you chose is becoming impossible, and yet you can't leave it, because leaving means capture, and capture means hanging. Some pirates try to take advantage of amnesty offers. Colonial governors occasionally offer pardons to pirates who surrender and swear off piracy. These offers are sometimes genuine, sometimes traps. Even when genuine, they come with conditions. You must inform on your former brothers, must help capture other pirates, must live under observation and suspicion for the rest of your life. And there's no guarantee the amnesty will hold. Governments have been known to revoke pardons and hang men who thought they were safe. Retirement is theoretically possible. If you accumulate enough wealth, you could disappear to some remote location, live quietly under an assumed name, hope no one ever recognizes you. A few pirates manage this. Henry Every famously retired wealthy and was never captured, though he also disappeared so thoroughly that no one knows what really happened to him. But for every one pirate who successfully retires, there are hundreds who die trying. The mathematics are brutal. You need to survive long enough to accumulate wealth, then find a place to hide, then live out your days without being recognized or betrayed. Every step has a low probability of success, and the probabilities multiply against you. Most pirates never accumulate significant wealth because most prizes are modest and shares are divided among large crews. Most places where you could hide are places where authorities are looking. Most attempts to retire peacefully end in capture when someone who knows your past betrays you for reward money, so you keep going because there's nothing else to do. You keep sailing, keep hunting prizes, keep surviving day by day. You don't think much about the future because thinking about the future means confronting the fact that you probably don't have one. You live in the eternal present, focused on immediate needs: food, water, survival through the next watch, the next storm, the next battle. You're 29 years old, though you look 50. Your body is broken, your health is ruined, your life expectancy is measured in months. You've been a pirate for 18 months, and you've got maybe another 12 months if you're very lucky. The odds say you'll be dead before you turn 30. Disease will take you, or battle, or drowning, or the noose. It doesn't much matter which. The destination is the same. Sometimes, late at night, lying in your hammock, listening to the ship creak and the men snore and cough around you, you think about the life you left behind. It wasn't much of a life: poverty, hard labor, no prospects. But you were alive, and you were free in ways you didn't appreciate. You could walk down a street without fear of recognition. You could imagine a future, even a modest one. You could be yourself instead of the hunted criminal you've become. But those thoughts don't help. They just make the present worse, add psychological suffering. So you push them away. You focus on today. You survived today. You'll probably survive tomorrow. That's enough. That has to be enough, because hoping for more is just setting yourself up for disappointment. This is your career as a pirate, short and brutal, and almost certainly ending badly. You're living on borrowed time, in borrowed brotherhood, with borrowed courage from rum and desperation. The life you chose has no future, only a rapidly approaching end. Every pirate knows this. Every pirate lives with this knowledge. It shapes everything: the desperate hedonism in port, the callousness toward violence, the fierce loyalty to crew members who are also condemned men. You're all dying together, slowly or quickly. And the brotherhood is real because it's a brotherhood of the damned. Welcome to your career. It won't last long. Make peace with that, if you can, and try to die well when your time comes, because it's coming soon. For every pirate, the end comes quickly. You're not special. You won't be the exception. Your story will end the way almost all pirate stories end, in death, probably painful, probably soon. That's the truth they didn't tell you when you signed those articles. That's the reality of the life you chose. Why we remember them. Gentle conclusion. It's been a long journey through these uncomfortable truths, hasn't it? We've walked together through the reality of pirate life, the filth, the disease, the violence, the suffering. We've stood in the shoes of desperate men making desperate choices, and we've seen where those choices led. It hasn't been romantic. It hasn't been glorious. It's been human, and human stories are often painful, complicated, difficult to categorize as purely good or purely evil. So why do we remember them? Why, 300 years later, do pirates still capture our imagination? Why do we tell their stories, create movies about them, dress our children as pirates for Halloween? The answer isn't simple, but it's worth considering. Because the stories we choose to remember say something about us, about what we value, about what we're searching for in history. Part of it is the freedom. Even though we've seen how limited and illusory that freedom was, pirates represented a rejection of hierarchy in an age when hierarchy was everything. They said no to kings and lords and the whole rigid structure of class and power. They created their own society with its own rules, and those rules were remarkably egalitarian for the 18th century. That matters. It mattered then, and it resonates now. On a pirate ship, a former slave could stand as an equal to a former gentleman. A man with no education could vote alongside a university graduate. Your birth meant nothing. Your contribution meant everything. This was revolutionary in a world where your station in life was determined at birth, and challenging that order was unthinkable. Pirates didn't just challenge that order, they completely rejected it and built something different. We remember them for that, for showing that alternative structures were possible even when the whole world insisted otherwise. The pirate democracy was imperfect, violent, and short-lived, but it existed. It proved that men could govern themselves without kings or nobles. This happened a generation before Enlightenment philosophers made these ideas respectable, before revolutions made them real. Pirates were accidentally political radicals. And that's part of their enduring appeal. There's also something in the human spirit that responds to people who refuse to accept their assigned fate. Most of the men who became pirates were dealt terrible hands by life. They were born poor, or enslaved, or impressed into brutal service. Society offered them nothing but suffering and early death in the legitimate world. They could have accepted that fate quietly. Instead, they said no. They chose a different suffering, one with at least a chance of something better, something more. That refusal, the absolute rejection of accepting what the world says you must accept, resonates across time. We admire it even when we recognize its costs. We admire the defiance even when we acknowledge that what they defied didn't give them the right to harm innocent people. Human morality is complex that way. We can hold multiple truths simultaneously: that pirates were victims and victimizers, that they were freedom fighters and criminals, that they deserve both our sympathy and our judgment. The pirates we remember most are those whose stories contain some element of these contradictions. Blackbeard was terrifying, deliberately cultivating a demonic image with his smoking beard and arsenal of weapons. But he rarely killed anyone unnecessarily, preferring intimidation to violence. Anne Bonny and Mary Read broke every gender norm of their time, fighting alongside men in an era when women were supposed to be delicate and domestic. They were criminals, yes, but they were also pioneers of a sort, proving that women could do everything men claimed was impossible for them. These complicated legacies, part villain, part hero, part victim, part victor, make for compelling stories. They resist easy categorization. They force us to think about context, about choices, about what we would do if we faced similar circumstances. Would you have been a pirate if you were born in 1700 and pressed into naval service, flogged daily, starved, and treated as disposable? Would you have signed those articles if the alternative was a debtor's prison or slavery, or just slow starvation in a society that had no place for you? Most people, if honest, would admit they might have made the same choice. Not because piracy was good, but because the alternative was often worse. This recognition that we might have done the same thing, that we're not so different from these historical figures we study, creates empathy. And empathy, even for criminals, even for people who did terrible things, is part of what makes us human. But let's be honest about why else we remember them. Because their lives were dramatic. The truth is, most of history is boring. It's farmers farming, merchants trading, people living quiet lives that didn't generate exciting stories. Pirates generated exciting stories: battles, treasure, exotic locations, larger-than-life personalities. These are the elements of adventure stories. And humans love adventure stories. We always have. The fact that the reality was mostly miserable doesn't change the story's appeal. We're not living it. We're just hearing about it. From our comfortable distance of 300 years, the suffering becomes abstract, while the adventure remains vivid. This is what all historical storytelling does. To some extent, Tits smooths away the boring parts, the painful parts, the parts that don't fit the narrative we want to tell. The pirate myth serves a function in our culture. It gives us a safe way to explore themes of rebellion and freedom and adventure without actually risking anything. We can imagine being pirates, free, bold, living by our own rules without actually having to experience scurvy or amputation or hanging. It's fantasy, pure and simple. And fantasy has value even when it bears little resemblance to truth. This is why I wanted to tell you the real story, the uncomfortable story. Not to destroy the myths serve purposes, but to honor the actual humans behind the myth. The men who became pirates weren't characters in an adventure story. They were real people who suffered and inflicted suffering, who made difficult choices in impossible circumstances, who lived complex lives that don't fit neatly into categories of good or evil. They deserve to be remembered as they actually were: desperate, often violent, frequently victims themselves, occasionally noble, sometimes monstrous, always human. Their lives were harder than we can imagine from our comfortable present. The physical suffering alone, the constant pain, the disease, the malnutrition, was more than most of us will ever experience. Add to that the psychological weight of violence, of being hunted, of knowing your life would probably end soon and badly, and you begin to glimpse the reality they lived. And yet they kept going. They survived as long as they could. They found moments of joy even in the midst of suffering, the camaraderie with crew members, the relief of capturing a prize with fresh food, the brief escapes into rum and companionship when they made port. They were resilient in ways we rarely need to be, and that resilience deserves recognition, even if the circumstances that required it were of their own making. There's also a lesson in their stories about the consequences of social injustice. Piracy flourished because legitimate society was so brutal to common people that criminality seemed like a reasonable alternative. The Navy was a nightmare of violence and exploitation. Merchant ships were barely better. Economic opportunities for poor men were essentially non-existent. Slavery was legal and widespread. In that context, piracy wasn't an aberration, it was a predictable response to injustice. This matters because it reminds us that crime doesn't happen in a vacuum. People don't become criminals just because they're bad. They become criminals because their circumstances push them in that direction, because legitimate options are unavailable or intolerable, because society has failed them in fundamental ways. The pirates of the Golden Age were products of their time, created by the injustices and brutalities of 18th century society. Understanding this doesn't excuse their crimes. The merchant sailors they robbed, the passengers they terrorized, the people they sometimes killed, these were innocent victims who didn't deserve what happened to them. The pirates' suffering doesn't erase the suffering they caused, but understanding the context helps us see the whole picture, helps us recognize that simple villains are rare in real history. Mostly, there are just people shaped by circumstances, making choices that seem reasonable from their perspective, even if those choices harm others. So we remember them as a reminder that freedom and oppression can coexist, that democracy can flourish in unlikely places, that people will resist injustice even when resistance is dangerous, that adventure and suffering are often intertwined, that history is complicated, and the people who live it are complicated, and simple narratives rarely capture the truth. We remember them, too, because forgetting would be easier, and easy isn't always right. It's easier to maintain comfortable myths than to confront uncomfortable realities. It's easier to see pirates as either romantic heroes or evil villains than to recognize them as complex humans whose lives don't fit our preferred narratives. But history isn't here to make us comfortable. It's here to make us think, to challenge our assumptions, to show us that humanity is messier than we'd like to believe. The pirates of the Golden Age lived difficult lives and mostly died young. They made choices we might judge harshly, and they suffered consequences that seem disproportionate to their crimes by modern standards. They were brave and cowardly, cruel and kind, selfish and selfless. Soften all of these things in the same person, sometimes in the same day. Their world is gone. The Golden Age of Piracy ended centuries ago, crushed by naval power and economic change, and the simple fact that organized society is ultimately more powerful than scattered criminals. The last of the pirates died long ago, their stories fading into legend, their realities obscured by time and mythology. But something of them remains in our cultural memory, transformed and distorted, but still present. We've taken their story and made it into something we need, a tale of freedom and adventure that speaks to our own desire to escape constraints, to live boldly, to reject authority. The fact that the reality was far darker doesn't diminish our need for the myth. We need stories about people who refuse to accept their assigned place, even if those people were criminals, even if their refusal led to suffering. So we remember them, these desperate men in their floating prisons, these criminals and rebels and victims all tangled together. We remember them imperfectly, mythologizing them in ways they wouldn't recognize, but we remember, and maybe that's enough. Maybe being remembered, even incorrectly, is its own kind of immortality, better than the anonymous graves and unmarked gibbets, where most of them actually ended. The next time you see a pirate story in a movie, in a book, on a theme park ride, know the truth behind it. You'll know about the hardtack and the weevils, about the disease and the violence, about the democracy built on desperation and the freedom that was really just another kind of prison. You'll know it was horrible, that you wouldn't have survived it, that even the survivors barely survived. And yet, perhaps you'll also understand why we still tell their stories, still find something compelling in these tales of desperate men on desperate seas. Because underneath all the suffering and crime and brutality, there was something genuinely human about them, the refusal to accept defeat, the attempt to build something better, even in impossible circumstances, the loyalty to each other, even when everything else was falling apart. That's worth remembering. That's worth honoring, in a careful way that doesn't excuse the harm they caused, but acknowledges the complicated humanity they embodied. They were people, products of their time, trying to survive and maybe even thrive in a world that gave them few good options. They failed, mostly. They suffered, definitely. They died young and often badly, but they lived first. They made choices, took risks, experienced both the worst and best of what human life can offer. They were, for better and worse, fully alive in ways that a safe, comfortable existence never requires. And 300 years later, we're still talking about them, still trying to understand them, still finding something in their stories that speaks to us. So rest well, knowing that history's harsh realities, understood honestly, can somehow make the present feel more precious. The pirates lived in misery so that we can appreciate that we don't. Their suffering was real, but so was their defiance, their loyalty, their stubborn refusal to disappear quietly into history's forgotten masses. They demanded to be remembered, and we've obliged. Imperfectly, but sincerely. Thank you for joining me on this journey into an uncomfortable corner of history. Thank you for being willing to see past the romance to the reality, for honoring these flawed humans by understanding them honestly rather than mythologizing them conveniently. Sleep well, and when you dream of pirates, dream of the whole truth, the horror, and the humanity all tangled together. I'll see you in the next story, where we'll explore another chapter of history that's stranger and sadder and more complicated than you ever learned in school. Until then, rest easy. The past has lessons to teach us, but we have the privilege of learning them from safety and comfort. Good night.